Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Melisa from Virginia, and she had some Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the state of Florida. Melisa is a retired firefighter and paramedic, and she worked alongside with law enforcement. The Bigfoot encounter took place northeast of Lake Harney, and the St. Johns River pours into that lake. The area is known by the locals as Maytown. I will show you guys the exact area to give you an idea of where the Bigfoot came out and picked up the deer. These types of encounters really intrigue me, and it lets me know that the Sasquatch are scavengers and opportunistic creatures, and they're always seeking their next meal. I said this on another Florida Bigfoot podcast, and I would really like to do research in the state of Florida, and hopefully I can get together with some like-minded researchers and head out that way to look for the Skunk Ape. Melisa also had some Bigfoot experiences from the state of Virginia, and it really makes sense why these creatures are on the East Coast. There's so much forest from the Appalachian Mountains all the way down into Florida. Hopefully people quit developing in Florida and leave the wilderness areas alone. It's our job to protect wildlife and the forest. The wildlife and nature just doesn't stand a chance against corporations and rich people. Every day, the forests are becoming smaller and smaller. Have you had a Bigfoot eyesight encounter before? If so, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Alright everyone, with all that being said, let's dive into our next Bigfoot encounter from the state of Florida. Melisa, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about you, Miguel?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you very much for asking. Melisa, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
My name is Melisa Drury, and I was born and raised in Volusia County, Florida. Lived there until 2022. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic for 31 years. And I grew up in Daytona Beach. I'm a second generation first responder. Some of the experiences that I know about came from my dad. I've had a couple experiences myself. I've also heard a lot of different things that have happened to other first responders. When we all get together, we tend to talk about strange things and share stories like that. The first time I ever heard or skunk apes ever came onto my radar, I was pretty little. I probably like 6 or 7, and my dad would talk about it. And I remember one particular story. This happened during the 70s in Ormond Beach. My dad had a friend who was a deputy, and he was sitting in Ormond on one of these long scenic drives, and a couple came flying by him going like 100 miles an hour. So of course, he's going to go chase them down. And when he finally caught them, he said, do you realize how fast you were going? That type of thing. And they said that they had been parked up at James Ormond Park, which is right next to Bulow Creek State Park. They'd been, getting down, and out of nowhere, this hairy being came out of the woods, and it was vocalizing. They said it was screaming. They said it started pushing over trees. And I mean, that area is like coastal hammocks. So it's live oaks and cabbage palms up there. But they said it just started pushing over trees and coming at them. And they just hauled butt out of there. And that's when he caught them. So he said, sure, okay, yeah, whatever. And he gave them a ticket, and off they went. Well, he drove up there because, curiosity gets the best of him. And he drove up there, and sure enough, there was a whole mess there. There were trees pushed over, a lot of footprints and things, and the story got out. And a lot of law enforcement people were talking about it. I mean, some of them would giggle like, yeah, right, that type of thing. But when I was a child, I remember that story in detail because we would take field trips from my school up to that park because they had a play area, and they had all these little side roads that the rangers would use. And I would always be up there thinking, oh, am I going to see this thing, skunk ape, And about that time, I also heard they used to call them mugwumps. I don't know why they called them that in Volusia, but they called them that too. But that's what happened in my childhood, and that just sticks out because that's such a crazy story, when you think about it. And first responders, we always have a lot of unusual things happen to us. But when you hear a story like that, not everybody believes it. It was the 70s, but it really happened, and it started my interest in Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Yeah, that is extremely interesting. So your father pulled these people over that were driving over the speed limit, and they said a Sasquatch was screaming and pushing over trees. This sounds like typical Bigfoot behavior. They get territorial and they display this primate type behavior. I'm not saying they are a primate, but yeah, I mean that sounds
Right.
terrifying. I can't imagine experiencing that. Most of the encounters I've had were pretty peaceful. I mean, they've pushed over trees, but not like demolished an area. I'm sure your father was extremely skeptical because he's pulled over a lot of people, and he's like, right, Bigfoot pushing over trees. That's why you're
Yeah.
speeding away.
It was actually a friend. It was actually a friend of his that was a deputy, and he told my father that story. So I actually heard it third hand.
Okay,
So
so it wasn't your father
yeah,
that pulled them over.
no, no, no. It was a friend of his, a very good friend of his that
Oh,
was a
okay.
deputy in Ormond. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So he went and investigated the area, and he saw the destruction, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's spooky for sure. Okay. Melissa, what else happened after this?
So, over the years, so that got me interested in Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and of course, in the 70s, that show In Search of, that was a great show. We all watched that. Um, So in my career, I've met different people who, especially in Florida, are hunters that know the woods really good, and we'll talk about things that have happened to them. And I worked with one guy that used to live in Orlando back in the late 60s, early 70s. He was older when I was just starting out, and he lived in I want to say like the Redbug Road area, Boggy Creek area. This is before it was all built up. They had a house and a few acres back there, and they had a dry lake bed back there. And he said that when he was a kid, in the dry lake bed, a skunk ape would come out. It would happen periodically. It would come out and it would exhibit this ape-like behavior, like it would just beat on the ground with its hands, and it was really loud, and it would vocalize, and he would, demonstrate how this thing would beat on the ground. And he said, when I was a kid, that scared the crap out of me. He said, we didn't know what that was. But he said, after a while, we just got used to it. And then when Orlando started to get built up and everything, they just didn't see it anymore. But I thought that was a very interesting story because you don't really hear too many stories like close around Orlando like that now because everything's so built up. So I also had another coworker who was a hunter, and I found out this information. I was working an overtime shift with him, and it was the station was in a very, very wooded area of Volusia County. It was in the Rima Ridge area, and it just kind of sits by itself, and there's this big open area behind it that's cleared, but then it's all woods. And I was working, and I said, "How come there is how who's leaving food outside?" Because I looked, we had like a door right next to the kitchen. We were in a temporary quarters, and I noticed like a refuse pile there, like of food. And I said, "Who's leaving food out there? What are they doing?" And he said, "Well, uh, they left food out." And I guess one of them really liked eagles. And in Florida, it's like, and when you see like roadkill on the side of the road, you have to take a double take, because not only do you see, vultures, but occasionally you'll see a bald eagle, and they're very big down here and down in Florida. So they started putting it out to see if they could get an eagle to come in. Well, this is how we got on the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatches, skunk apes. He said to me that he thought that a skunk ape had come in, like an opportunistic thing, because they'd left food out. And I'm like, really, I'm kind of taken aback. I'm like, wow, really? Because I'm into that. He said that on a few occasions he had gone for a walk before bed, done a little fitness, and then he would walk the perimeter of this area. It was about an acre in size. He'd walk along the edges, and there were on a few occasions where there was something in the woods that was paralleling him. And he said when he would walk, it would walk. He would stop, it would stop. And this went on for, I don't know, a few months off and on. And as far as I know, when he retired, it was still going on. But his opinion was is they'd put their food waste outside, and that had brought in a skunk ape, because they're very opportunistic about that. That's what I think. I mean, it's an easy meal. If somebody's throwing their leftover pizza out there, why wouldn't you, right? So that's one story. I had an incident happen to me where I was working a double, and it was me, myself, and my partner at the time. Him and I worked together probably off and on for 10 years. I mean, he was the best partner I ever had. He was like my dad. Anyway, so one night we get a call to come and back up a sister station that's in a very, very rural area. And I mean, this is really rural. This is East Central Florida, tree farm type thing. And what they wanted us to do was they wanted us to drive down into this rural area because our sister station was tied up on a very bad car accident. They wanted us to go, move in, go halfway. That way we could come down to the scene if they needed extra hands, or we could break away and take a call in their area. So you get the gist. So we're out on this dirt road. And I have to give a little backstory here. So at the time, there was a whole lot of development planned in that area. And there's a lot of wildlife out there. And there were some people in our community that were trying to prove undocumented cases of Florida panthers as a separate population in that area in East Central Florida. That's an area that had never been studied. So I was on the lookout constantly for anything like that. And I even had like a plaster of Paris kit with me in the truck just in case, because that's one of the things you have to have is if you see something and you can cast the prints of the Florida panther and bring them to Game and Fish. So anyway, so it's about midnight. We are out in BFE. This is in the middle of nowhere, tree farm, and we are going along this dirt road, and we go to pull in to park to get ready, for posting. And on the right side of the road, I see a dead deer. And I said, "Oh, crap." I said, to my partner, I said, "Oh, that deer just got hit, that's right there, and I noticed that deer. I'm like, wow, it's right there on the curve of the road. And the accident was farther down. So I was wondering, if they hit the deer and then went on and crashed. I didn't know what happened. So we passed the dead deer on the side of the road, and we make like a little L-shaped curve, and we park on the side of the road. And I had been working a double, and I was really, really, really tired. I brought my pillow from the station, and my partner was sitting in the driver's seat. And where we are, there are no street lights, but the moon was out. So you could see pretty well the road, things. You could see pretty well because the moon was nice and bright. And I promptly fell asleep on my pillow. because I was so exhausted. So my partner is sitting in the driver's seat, and somebody has to stay awake. So he's sitting there, and at the time, we had these big mirrors on the side of the fire truck that were very tall, and they had a big convex mirror at the bottom. And he was sitting there, and he just happened to be looking in the mirror. And he said this thing. It was a humanoid type creature, tall, all dark. He said it crossed the road in 2 steps. It picked up the dead deer there under one arm and walked on. I don't know how he was able to sit there and not make a sound. And I mean, he's an old Florida boy, but still. So he never made a sound after seeing that. So I woke up, and right about that time they called us and they said, "You can go back to quarters. We don't need you." And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Oh, I can go back to my bed. We do like a 3-point turn in the dirt road right there. And we're starting to go back. And I go, oh my God. I said, the deer's gone. I said, I bet a panther took it. I said, can I just get out for a second and just look for tracks? Can I just do that real quick? Can I just get out the flashlight? Because I mean, I was like dead on panther, thinking that's what came and drug it off. And my partner was like, no, I'm not stopping the truck. No. And I was really mad. I was mad for a long time about that because he was just so rude to me about saying no. And I figured he just wanted to get back to the station. So we drive back to the station, life goes on. 8 months later, he comes to me and he says, remember that night we were out there in Lake Harney? And I said, yes, where I tried to get the tracks I said, I'm still a little pissed at you about that. He goes, that's not why I didn't want to stop. He goes, I saw a skunk ape cross the road, and he told me exactly what he had seen. And he said, the reason I did not tell you for 8 months is because I did not want you to be afraid of working in the woods. Because we're in there for brush fires, ATV accidents. That's what he said to me. He says, I didn't want you to be afraid to work in the woods. So that was, I mean, I was around one, but I didn't actually see it because I was asleep. Now that happened on the tree farm that is in Lake Harney, between Lake Harney and Oak Hill, Florida. So it happened on a long 18-mile stretch of road that connects east central Florida and west, southeast and southwest central Volusia County. Sorry. So anyway, years and years go by. He retires and stuff, and I never told anybody that story while we were still working. Here he was still working. So he retired a few years ago. And I told a few people that story after that, because some people will ridicule you about stuff. I mean, it's, and then you get like a nickname, and anyway, so it's a whole thing. So he retires, and I said, had this experience, this happened, and I absolutely believe him. So little time goes by, and I get assigned to the station that's on the other side of that road. So it's like the sister station that we were backing up that night. And one day I'm sitting there, and a couple of my colleagues chime in and say, hey, didn't you, when you were partners with so-and-so, didn't you guys see a skunk ape or something out there? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't tell a whole lot of people that story, but yeah. I said, I did not see it. I was asleep. But my partner saw it, and I absolutely believe him. And they said, well, we've had a couple of incidents out here where we've been working in this tree farm area, very rural, brush fires. And at dusk, they were walking, these 2 coworkers of mine were walking with the property owner and they were walking the line to make sure the line was all intact, that they hadn't had like a spot over or anything, or that everything was within the lines. And they said, the sun started going out and it got to be dusk and everything. And they said they didn't know what this was, but there was something in the woods that started screaming at them that was so loud. And both these people are hunters, and they know the animals and flora and fauna of Florida. And they heard an animal that started screaming at them so loud that it scared them so bad that they just were out of there. And they didn't say so much, but they said, well, we think it's, we think it could be something like Pop or this person saw. So, and I absolutely believe them. I mean, there have been a lot of things that have happened in Volusia County. I mean, I read the BFRO all the time, and there have been a lot of incidents. There was one that happened behind where I used to live, where some people were turtle fishing or trapping turtles, and something left prints and stole their turtles, and that was actually right behind my house. So there's a lot of things that happen in Volusia County, and yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like you've been around a lot of activity or know people who have, and you just happen to be in all the best spots, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, it's I was born there, so I've seen the area grow up and grow, and it's very developed now. But you still have you're that area, you're still backing up on a lot of wildlife preserve, a lot of national forest, a lot of state park areas. So there's still a lot of green area around and through that county. So there are highways for all types of animals, and and people have seen, there have been documented sightings of oh, my brain just went, Florida panthers.
Hmm.
But why not skunk apes, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, typically people from like other areas that aren't locals in Florida, they would just think, oh, there's not enough woods in Florida. But you hear about these panther stories, and it seems to be like, I don't know, there seems to be more panther sightings there in Florida than in Missouri, and Missouri's covered in woods. So if these things can hide there, certainly Sasquatch can.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you get these areas that are coastal hammock, which is, like I said, the cabbage palm and live oak trees. There's a lot of game. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of water. So why not? It's the perfect habitat. And to be in these little patchy areas of swamps and stay hidden. That's so I absolutely believe they're still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've come across a lot of Bigfoot reports, let's say like on the BFRO and online. What's the most significant encounter story that you remember that really sticks with you?
Uh, there was one that, well, besides the one that happened behind our house with the turtles, there was one that happened in DeLand next to Lake Diaz. I think it happened in 2019 or 2020. And the person was traveling on Highway 17 past Lake Diaz. And Lake Diaz, for me, I have done a lot of recreation on that lake, around that lake. I've swam, boated all around, hiked trails around there. So I've been around that area a lot. And this person was coming up. I mean, I haven't read it recently, but this person was coming up in their ATV, and they had big lights on the top of it. Those big KC lights that people used to have. And he saw this creature cross the road. He saw the entire thing. It crossed the road right there in front of Lake Diaz. And I used to work at that fire station in Pearson. I used to drive that road every third day in the dark. And I was thinking, wow, that could have been me. That could have been me seeing that. And so after that, I always tried to keep my eyes and ears open, especially when we were working in the woods. at night, because when all the noises stop, that means a predator's around. So heard that a few times. So,
Yeah.
but
And the people that asked you about the skunk ape encounter, it sounds like they kind of pinpointed what was screaming in the woods. And, a lot of people say that panthers scream, which I'm sure they do. But when one of these things vocalizes, it's a lot different. And I'm sure a mountain lion sounds pretty gnarly, but just a Sasquatch sounds next level, like prehistoric.
right. And that's what they said. They said no one here. So you have three people that are experienced hunters, and no one there knew what this sound was, but it was loud and crazy enough that it scared them out of the woods. I mean, they were like, okay, it's time to leave. So, and then after that happened, they came and asked me about the thing that happened with me and my partner in generally the same area where my partner had that sighting. And then I told them that whole story again, and they were pretty much like, yeah, that's what it was. So I mean, without actually saying it, but I know what they meant.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like Florida would be the best place to gather evidence. And you've heard me talk about wanting to go to Florida. It just seems like, I don't know, you'd be able to run a drone and possibly like capture one of these things or get in close quarters to one of them. What are your thoughts about it? Do you think it's actually harder because of like the swamps, the bugs, the humidity? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, because a lot of times, and this happens a lot of times, you get people who are investigators or enthusiasts that are from other areas, and they come down to Florida at the worst time of year. And if you're not used to the heat and the bugs and everything else, it literally can just take your focus off what you're there for. You can come there during there really isn't a cold season there anymore. They think they have like one cold day. But yeah, that's you have to come down there prepared, for mostly the environment, a way that you can stay dry while you investigate. But I think they're around. I think they're always around. I think they're kind of like the way panthers are. Panthers have that large 200-mile radius that one panther will roam. And I think skunk apes are the same way. I think they have areas that they move through that are these, like I said, the green heart of Florida. They go up and down, and I think you can find them all the way down, in the Everglades. Obviously, um, I had my old partner that saw the skunk ape told me a story because he grew up in Miami. He used to go out into the Everglades, and he would collect. He used to collect tree snail shells, and he would go to these hammocks and stuff. And he said, well, first of all, you always knew when it had human habitation, because like a sour orange would be growing there, and that was like from a seed from the Seminoles, because they hid out in the Everglades. But he said, sometimes he would go to these hammocks, they would kind of like be by themselves in a whole sea of grass, and he would go there to look for shells and stuff. And he he would go up to the hammock, and he just wouldn't have a good feeling, like he wasn't alone. Sometimes he would smell a bad smell, and that's like class to me. I mean, if you smell that sulfury, cabbagey, that smell they're supposed to have, kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it, kind of like a really bad wet dog, sulfury. And there were times he went into hammocks and he smelled that, and he had like a feeling like, well, I shouldn't be here, like you like, go away, you don't belong here. And he would just go on to the next one. He would just skip it, So it makes you wonder, how uh how many skunk apes there really are down there, and what kind of range they have. And do they go the whole length of Florida? I mean, is there like a skunk ape trail that we have to discover? I don't know. It's very interesting. It was fun growing up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Florida has a good number of skunk apes, but also I've wondered if they travel like all up and down the East Coast or maybe even to the Midwest, because like you said, there's like this giant green section on the map in Florida, but I also see that it like connects to like Georgia, the Carolinas, and it goes all the way up to Vermont. Like it's a huge section of woods. And unfortunately, Florida's become very populated, like you mentioned. And
Hmm.
it seems like people are building there every day and more habitat is being destroyed.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, unfortunately, but there's still a lot of forest in the Panhandle, and of course, there's obviously the Everglades in South Florida, But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to those populations there. So I know since we've moved up here to Virginia, I mean, I've had a couple things happen to me that were kind of weird, but I don't know a lot about Sasquatches up here.
Hmm.
Um,
No, there's a lot of
but
sightings there. That's for sure. Where you're at right now, that's a huge forest.
we do you want to hear about the ones in Virginia?
Yeah, let's hear about the Sasquatch in Virginia.
Um, so when we first moved up here, the first year we were here, one of my old partners came up to visit, and we all went up to Natural Bridge, the big rock formation that George Washington surveyed, and the whole thing. It's called Natural Bridge. It's in the Jefferson National Forest, and it's a state park. So we were hiking, and it was getting to be the end of the day. There weren't a whole lot of people around, and we had just moved to Virginia, so I didn't have my legs, my mountain legs that I have now. But anyway, so her and my husband, I said, go on up to the waterfall. I'm just going to sit here and look at my phone or read the pamphlet or whatever. And the way Natural Bridge is set up is when you walk through the big Natural Bridge rock formation, there's a trail that goes up toward a waterfall. And on the right is this little amphitheater that they built, this little wood stage with little rustic benches. And it's right next to a creek that runs through there. So I was sitting there minding my own business. And I mean, there was like, I think I saw maybe 3 or 4 people the whole time I was sitting there going back and forth. And the park closes at sundown. So I was waiting for them to come back. So I'm just sitting there, and at first I thought acorns were falling out of the trees. And because I kept hearing like this boom boom, on the ground. And it kept happening. And I'm like, what is that? What is that? Because I did not grow up here. I don't know all the different things. And I went around thinking, I like acorns. Let me look to see if I can find some and pick some up. I couldn't find an acorn anywhere. Nowhere. Nowhere. So I sit back down. I'm still waiting. I'm the only one sitting there. The sun's starting to go down. And from over my right shoulder, I see a pebble that's probably the size of, I don't know, an oval golf ball. Just, I see it as it hits the ground. Boom, boom. So, and this happened twice. 2 rocks that I actually saw as they came over. And behind the creek, it goes straight up. I mean, it's just straight up the mountain. I mean, there's nowhere for anybody to be. There's nobody around. And I I don't know, it was such a weird feeling because I was like, did I just see that? And I didn't say anything, but I got really scared and I walked down to where the trail kind of curves around, and I waited for them to come back, and I didn't say anything to anybody. And we got back. Couple days go by. She's still staying with us and everything. And I finally told my husband, but I felt like I was crazy. I'm like, nobody's going to believe me. Nobody's going to believe that this happened. Nobody. And I didn't tell her for like 3 months. It was kind of like the same situation with me and my old partner. He didn't tell me for 8 months, but I didn't tell her for like 3 months. And I said something was throwing rocks at me. I had no idea what it was, but something was throwing rocks at me. And to this day, I don't know if it was a person. I don't know if it was something else, but it was hardly anybody in that park, and I was sitting alone. It was really crazy. The other thing that happened is about months ago, we were at an Airbnb next to a small park that's on a mountain here that we can see from our home. And we had wanted to hike this mountain for like a really long time. It has like a little trail that's like medium intensity. So we get the Airbnb for 2 nights. The first night we're there, they had like a little outdoor fire pit. So we're out burning wood. And some people from up the mountain were like coming past where we were staying, and they were going to a party that was like further down this little dirt road. And we could hear them, I mean, they weren't being too loud. There wasn't like crazy music or anything like that. But it got to be probably about 10 o'clock at night. I think this was like 10:15. So they're all, I can hear them talking, there's a party going on, this and that. They're not being too loud. And all of a sudden, and I don't know exactly where from. I don't know if it was like from the state park area or an area next to it, but somewhere from where we were sitting in front, probably I don't even want to like guess at the distance. We heard a tree fall over, and it was incredibly loud, and everything got quiet at that party. And then everybody just very quickly came up the hill and left. So I don't know if that means anything, but I looked it up after that, and there have been quite a few sightings in that area and on the backside of Salem, where this is. So hard to say. It was really, it was pretty crazy hearing it. It's perfectly quiet except for a little, talk down the way. And this tree, it must have been a big tree too, because it just went whoop, just very, very loud. And the party broke up after that. So, and these were all locals. So I don't know what happened. I can only speculate, but I thought that was very, very strange. So, but, stuff like that goes on up here. People are very superstitious about the Appalachian Mountains. So who's to say?
Yeah, absolutely. We know they're in there, and it does sound like Bigfoot activity. Why do you think they were throwing rocks at you?
Well, first of all, I was all by myself. They weren't throwing them at me. They were landing probably 10, 12 feet to my right side. They weren't throwing them at me. I don't know. I was sitting by myself, and I remember sitting there. I had my phone out, and I said, you know what? I'm going to put my phone away because I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to look at this pamphlet that we got at the front about Natural Bridge, because we just moved there. I didn't know a lot about it. So I'm reading that, and that's when that happened. And I don't know if they were trying to get my attention. I don't know if they're trying to get me to leave because it was the end of the day. I don't know. The sun was starting to go down. It was starting to get to the end. But one other thing that happened when we were at Natural Bridge is we walked out, and we were like pretty much the last people to come out of there. And right when we got to the stairs that go up to where the museum and the guest center is, we smelled this horrible, horrible smell. And I had forgotten about this, but my partner who was with us at the time reminded me. It smelled like I don't even decomposing, something decomposing and feces together. It was a really, really, really bad smell. And I'm very sensitive to smell. And I did not notice any smells while I was there. And when we went to leave, there was this area that smelled very rancid, and I remarked on it. She remarked on it. My husband, who is a plumber, has terrible sense of smell, he even smelled it. So I don't know. That was really crazy. I don't know if something followed, but it's very wooded and rural up there, very, very rural. So I'm sure that they're up there running around. I don't know why they threw rocks at me, or by me. I wish I'd kept the rocks. I was too scared.
Yeah, it sounds like they were trying to get your attention. Maybe they have a sense of humor, or they were just like picking on you. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. I
Yeah,
wish
it's
I'd kept the
mysterious.
rocks, but
Mm.
yeah. So
Do you think that's possibly why they call it the skunk ape? Because these creatures can emit like a skunk odor or like a foul smell?
yes. Yes, that's why I think they're called that in Florida because we have something that grows there called skunk cabbage that's very, very foul smelling. And I think that's why they got the moniker skunk ape because they're very. I've read that they're very foul smelling. Because they're a fully, they have hair all over their body and they don't bathe. So as far as I know, so they're just like if you had a large, hairy dog and you didn't bathe it, it would get very, very intense very quickly. So
Yeah, absolutely. Those are my thoughts as well. And possibly it's like a distress hormone or like a territorial thing. The Bigfoot that I saw here in Missouri, it was jet black, about 8 foot tall. And when it stood up, it had these two white stripes going down its back. And it gave me the impression of like a skunk or a lemur. And I don't know, it just really reminded me of a skunk. And then I thought back to the Florida skunk ape. Like, is that why they call it the skunk ape? Because it has like these stripes going down its back. And then I don't know, I heard a lot of people talk about the smell, and it's like, okay, one or two reasons why they call this thing the skunk ape. I don't know.
yeah, I always thought it was because of the skunk cabbage and stuff.
Mhm.
So, and you said it was all black. So here, well, in Florida, the swamps, if you see a panther, they're usually not that brown color that we associate with those type of big cats. Usually, they've been in the swamp, and they can be like people can mistake them as being black too, just from the mud. So that's something to think about too. I don't know if you live by the swamp or anything like that, but that's something to think about too.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't live by a swamp. I do live by a river, and it's fairly clean. I've also speculated that maybe they change colors depending if it's summer or winter time. And I know like there are animals like rabbits that'll turn white when it snows. So that was just another theory that I had, but it's hard to say.
That's very interesting. I would have never even thought of that. And it seems so self-explanatory because other animals do it. Well, I mean, why wouldn't a Sasquatch do it? So get a winter coat and a summer coat. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's
but
possible.
so um
Do you
wow.
think oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you think the skunk ape is a type of undiscovered primate or something else?
I do. I do. I think because there's so much oral history with Native Americans. There are. I think that My personal opinion is that they are an undocumented type of primate. I mean, we know about Gigantopithecus in Asia, right? So 40,000 years ago, people are coming across the land bridge up in Alaska to come here to North America and South America. I mean, why? I mean, obviously, animals migrated with them too. I mean, why wouldn't a cryptid like that migrate with the people? I mean, not like in a group or anything like that, but when it's open, make their way across. They see the people going across there. I mean, it's natural curiosity. So
Hmm.
I think that they are uh, an undiscovered primate. Yes, because they sound like a primate. Their vocalizations. It's like if you took a human and a primate and like went 50-50, but much, much louder. Uh, but that's just my personal opinion. But I think they came across the land bridge with people when people came here.
Yeah, it would make sense because these things are in China and Russia and other countries as well, even Australia. So it seems like they're a global thing. And I don't know, people catch glimpses of them, and unfortunately, that's all it is. Sometimes you hear these bizarre encounters where people like interacted with them and hung out with them for a long time. I don't know much about that, but I have taken reports where, let's say, like someone's camping and the Sasquatch just hung out at their camp all day, and I don't know. I mean, they definitely seem
I
elusive, but you just never know what these things are capable of. I also took another report similar to that from, I believe it was Oregon. They were sitting at a picnic table in a wilderness area, and the Sasquatch came up to the table and just like started eating the food. They were freaked out though. They went to the vehicle and just sat there in complete terror.
I mean, it's almost like, did somebody tame the Sasquatch with food? You know, I mean, I would freak out too. I mean, my gosh.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Would you
That's crazy.
be open to that happening to you, like where a Sasquatch just comes out and interacts with you, or would you be terrified?
I probably wouldn't be able to move,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, I think
It's
anyone would be
like
in shock.
it would, yeah, I would. I mean, but we have so many, I know it's going to happen up here because we have so many, like, there's so many sightings that happen up here. My husband actually went and got a dash cam just in case, because we do a lot of day trips and we travel through some of these really wild areas, and it's like we just got back from a place that was up around Natural Bridge where we were staying, that was in the middle of the woods, that was really good habitat. It was in a river bottom and everything, and I said, well, I said, if you're going to see something like that, it's probably going to be in a place like this, you know. But um but yeah, I mean, I can't. Well, you don't know what you're going to do until it happens. So,
Yeah, I agree. Was there ever a protocol for law enforcement that encountered these creatures, or with your old job? Like, were you guys told not to talk about it?
uh, no, not so much. But guys would, if you talked about, there was at one time if you talked about Bigfoot or ghosts or anything like that, people didn't believe it. There were some people that didn't believe it, and they would ridicule it. So after a while, you just don't talk about that kind of stuff. But people who do believe it will come and seek you out. But as far as management, I mean, no, they never told us not to talk about it or anything like that. But if something happened on the shift, and it involved something like that, I mean, I would tell my supervisor. I mean, and the funny thing about it is that my supervisor was with me when we had the Sasquatch or the Skunk Ape encounter. So we just kept it among us for a long time.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. I mean, that's a touchy subject, even in law enforcement, and you don't want your coworkers to think you're crazy or not reliable.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing, is that, you get a nickname or you get a reputation, but I have to say though, it's a lot more open now, than it was like 20 years ago. People talk openly about things now, and that, because knowledge is power. If you know these animals are out there, I think it's, even though they haven't found a body yet, I mean, I think it's pretty apparent that these things are out there, that we're living, with them in our environments here, and 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 I'm happy that people are more open about talking about these things, and because in the old days it was kind of like, oh, crazy. They'd put a label on you, and then that was it. So a lot of things that happened to me in my job, I saw a lot of things in my career I didn't necessarily tell anybody or talk about. But I'm glad that it's more open now, that I can share these things like on your program.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've seen things in your life that you probably wish you've never seen before, and I'm sure some of the things were kind of hard to deal with. So, encountering a Sasquatch probably wasn't so bad compared to some of the things that you've seen as far as like accidents or, you know, things like that.
Right, right. I just wish I'd been awake when it walked across and grabbed the deer out the side of the road.
Yeah.
So that would have been amazing. But
Did
anyway, but it happened to him, and I believe him.
yeah, did he see the skunk ape come out and grab the deer? I know you saw the dead deer, and when you went back, it was gone.
Yes, he was sitting in the driver's seat, and he was kind of leaned over to his left, and the big mirror that shows it with the convex shows. He said it showed the whole, pretty much the way he was parked. It was showing the whole width of the road, and he was looking in the mirror, and this thing stepped out. He said it was all dark. It crossed the road, and I mean, this is like a 2-lane dirt road. It crossed the road in 2 steps, and when it went to the other side, it picked up the dead deer in one hand, put it under its arm, and walked on.
Wow. How big did he
And
say the
yeah,
Sasquatch was, or the skunk ape?
well, he didn't. So he just said it was just tall. We
Mhm.
didn't really have a. It was because it walked through the road. He didn't really say how tall it was, but he said it was taller than a man,
Yeah.
which
So
would be.
it sounds like it was waiting for you guys to cross or to pass by, and then it made its move.
Yeah. So I mean, but that was pretty gutsy. I mean, where this thing walked across the road was probably only about 50 feet behind our truck.
Hmm. I've heard a
And
lot of
and I would
reports like that where people look in their mirror and they see this primate creature cross the road. So it sounds like they do wait for people to pass by, and maybe it's a good idea to check your mirrors when you're driving through wilderness areas because they're smart enough to wait. They're like, okay, this vehicle is going to pass, then I'm going to make my move.
exactly. Yeah, they're very smart. And to pick up a deer like that in one arm and walk on. I mean, deer aren't huge in Florida, but they're still pretty weighty. I mean, you're still talking about like at least 100 pounds. And
Hmm.
I just wish we'd stopped, but he was having none of it. That was his reaction, and I didn't find out until 8 months later. So, but yeah, he didn't. He wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, I'm glad he told you though. And the skunk apes sound like they're powerful creatures, and it probably picked up that deer like a Raggedy Ann doll.
Yeah, I just wish I'd stopped and looked for footprints or something. But oh well. I mean, I never forgot it because of the whole uh the whole uh, the Florida Panther thing, because I was kind of pissed for so long. That's why I remembered it, and that's why it's so fresh in my mind. Because I can remember it being in the truck that night. I remember the environment, the whole thing. I can remember everything, and so I wish I'd seen it, but that's for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure. It bothered you that he didn't tell you at the time, but at the same time, maybe he was worried about your mental well being, and like you said, he wanted you to be around in the forest and not be scared off.
Right, right, absolutely, yeah, absolutely correct. I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, it would have been nice though to go back and see if there were any tracks, or possibly if these creatures were still in the area.
yeah, where this happened at is it is like a pine uplands. It's and the, it's an old tree farm, so it's mostly like dry pine uplands. Okay, but then if you follow the road down, it takes you down to a swamp area. So it's like swamp and lake adjacent. So I figured that's probably where this thing lives, and it probably maybe heard the deer get hit because it was really fresh, um, and came over, opportunistic. It's an easy meal. He didn't have to track down. But I think that's what happened. And it was very bright that night. It was a full moon. It was very, very bright. And yeah, so
Do you think your partner ever went back looking for evidence?
I don't know. I never asked him. I didn't even think to ask him.
Mhm. I would
Hmm.
suspect that he did. He probably went back later on and just kind of checked things out.
Yeah, because I mean, I never asked him because he never told me about it for like 8 months. So I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about it. I've been on that road since, and they've since paved that road. And there are some homes back there. There weren't any homes out there before. And now there's a few homes. And like you said, things are getting built up. But it was dirt back then. It was a pretty rural area, pretty dark at night. And but I mean, luckily for us, we had the full moon. So, but it had there was a big, in front of us where the swamp was, it was like a big tunnel of trees. We didn't park in there because it was very dark. But you know how you can have a canopy of trees and it keeps the light out and it makes things very dark. So I mean, something could have moved up through there, without us seeing it. So, and we were parked in front of that. We didn't park in that. But it's just a very unique area, because you've got wildland areas with lakes that are adjacent to tree farms that grow pine trees, So,
Yeah, these things like to hang out in the pines and in the swamps, and they're always around water. And it makes sense that you guys had this encounter when there was a full moon. A lot of people talk about them being nocturnal, and possibly the moon makes them more active.
really.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people, but my sightings were during the day, or at least most of them were. But I don't know. There seems to be a lot of activity at nighttime, especially from campers and just people out in the woods at night. I think they're out
I,
and about 24/7, but I'm not really sure.
I think, I don't know. Yeah, I think they're about 24/7 too, but at night there's less people, there's less,
Hmm.
time to get caught doing things. I mean, all the things, all the encounters that have happened up here that I've read about, up here where we live now, have all been like opportunistic. Like somebody's delivering the newspaper, and this is years ago, but somebody's delivering the newspaper, and they saw a Sasquatch, and it climbed up on a hill and started screaming at them to leave. They were on a little dirt road delivering newspapers. Another one, the lady was driving to work at 4 a.m. and she worked at a prison, and it was on a dirt road, and she saw a Sasquatch, you know, kneeling on the side of the road, and he had been looking at these two deer across the road, and the woman thought maybe he didn't realize, he was so into hunting those deer that he didn't realize when she drove up and saw him. That type of thing goes on here a lot. A lot of people see him, a lot of road crossings and things. That's why we got a uh, dash cam, because there's a lot of road crossings that happen up here.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Does the dash cam record as you guys are driving, or if something like happens, you can go back and review the video? Like, does it
yeah,
activate?
it'll activate for, like bumps or stuff, small things, but it has a button on it, and as soon as you hit the button, it will save the 20 seconds in front of that. So as soon as you hit it, it'll save the 20 seconds before you hit the button. So if it happens and you hit it within a certain amount of seconds, it'll record and it'll save it. So that's how they were on our emergency vehicles too.
Oh wow, I need to pick one up for myself, and I think that'd be really cool, especially since I drive through wilderness areas. If one walks right in front of my vehicle, I'll have it on film. Is it pretty good
Have
quality?
you Yeah, it is. It's excellent quality, and it's he got it through his truck manufacturer, Nissan, and they
Wow.
put it in for him. It's really good. Have you seen any of the dash cam videos of Sasquatches from Russia? I know you must have seen those.
I don't think I have. Are there some good ones out
This,
there?
yeah, yeah, there are, and just like guys going along on a real snowy road, and like something big and white, like you were talking about how maybe they changed their coat color for the season,
Hmm.
like something like this giant big and white thing just kind of runs through this very deep snow, and it's not a person. I saw one like that. I saw another one that was filmed in Siberia, And this thing came out of a bog and was like climbing out to get these people that were in a car. I saw that one. You'll have to Google it because there's quite a few out there. Because
Mm.
one of my old partners grew up in Russia, and she said everybody in Russia has a dash cam, and they're always catching things all the time.
Wow.
So
I think I've seen one from Canada late at night, and it was like a terrible snowstorm, or it looked like there was a lot of snow on the ground, but this big white Sasquatch on all fours is like charging the vehicle. I don't know if you've seen that one.
no, oh my goodness,
Hmm. Yeah, it'd be
ugh,
spooky. So they have the capability of recording at night as well, correct?
yes.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna pick one up. I mean, you never know. I mean, like if someone hits you or something, at least you have it, so you got evidence that somebody ran into you.
hmm Well, that too, but I mean, I figure if you're driving along and you see one cross the road, you have like a couple of seconds to register and then go, oh crap, and then hit the button, and then you have 20 seconds back.
Hmm.
So you should be able to catch that. So, but yeah, I'm all about that. I want to start camping up here, doing more camping up here, and my husband had a lot of experiences up here when he was a Boy Scout. He grew up here, and they would go. We have a reservoir that's just down the road from us that's very mountainous, and the Boy Scouts would go there and camp, and they would they would hear these just roars at night. And the funny thing about it is my husband like repressed it for like decades. He didn't, it was like it happened, but then he just kind of forgot about it or repressed it or whatever. And we were watching a show where they were playing the vocalizations back, and he just looked at me and he goes, "That's exactly what I heard at Carvin's Cove when I was a kid." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yes." He said, and there was always more than one. And he said they would call from peak to peak, like one was on one peak and one was on the other peak, and they would call back and forth. And I said, "What did you think it was?" And he goes, "I don't know." He says, "Just animals, because he's a kid. He's like 8. And I said, "Well, what did you ask your scoutmaster what that was or anything?" He goes, "No." He goes, "No, we didn't. No." He said, "My scoutmasters were all like World War II vets. They were in Korea. They were all these tough old birds." He goes, "You're not going to talk about that stuff to, they weren't." He said they weren't afraid of anything. Because I asked him, I said, "Weren't you afraid?" He goes, "No, those guys, we weren't afraid of anything. They weren't afraid of anything." But yes, he said that there were probably 3 or 4 times where his Boy Scout troop would camp out there at the reservoir, and they camped in an area that's you can't camp at. I mean, only the Boy Scouts can camp there. It's not like open to the public. And he said at night, they would they would hear these calls, and he said sometimes they'd be farther away, but they were really really loud, and I just couldn't get wrap my head around the fact that he didn't ask anybody what that was. But he said one thing that happened is that pretty early in, their scoutmaster said that they weren't allowed to go to the latrine by themselves, that they had them go in groups, at least groups of 2. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah, that happened to my husband. Oh my gosh, he goes on and on about that now. That's what I heard. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. I took a report from Virginia, and the guy was out there with his family, and I guess when his daughter went to the bathroom at the park, there was like a Sasquatch right there in the woods, and a few shots were fired. I don't think they tried to hit it, but like the thing just tore off through the woods, and it freaked her out because the little girl just screamed, and yeah, everyone was like terrorized because it was just unexpected. This thing was just right there in the wood line, and he didn't know if it was trying to get his daughter or what was happening.
I know, isn't that crazy? Those stories about them trying to like kidnap women or kids. I've heard that maybe they're curious, or I don't really know. I don't really know. I have heard, I have watched shows where they talked about uh they can make sounds like a baby crying. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that before. That's definitely
Yeah,
spooky.
and I feel like that's like, and it's just my personal opinion, but that is a really good way to lure a woman into the woods. Is if
Yeah,
you have a sound like a baby crying. And so I don't know.
that's a good point. You just never know. And possibly they're trying to lure females into the woods. And I definitely wouldn't dismiss it because the Native Americans talked about that. And apparently they've experienced like abductions being carried out by these creatures, whether it's women or children in the tribe. So I don't know. Researchers will say, oh, they're just curious. But I would definitely keep in mind what the Native Americans said because they lived out there and they experienced it.
Yeah, how do you feel about Bigfoot, like especially in the Northwest? How do you feel about like them being predators, like predating on us?
I
Do you think
definitely,
that's a possibility?
yeah, I definitely do. I mean, you always hear that there's good ones and bad ones out there. And, you know, if you run into a rogue Sasquatch or one that's just hungry and hasn't eaten in a long time, I feel like humans would be on the menu.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
So
I don't
it's
think
good to
they're
have
all
a
like
healthy
that.
respect.
Yeah,
No, no, no.
I feel like in Florida, since there's a lot of food sources as far as like fish, gators, and all kinds of little critters, like they have plenty to eat and they're opportunistic, so they'll take food from people. I don't feel like it's likely to happen, but in areas where it's just like super vast, like in Canada, you just never
Yeah,
know what they're up to. Like if one's injured and it can't kill a moose or find food because food's like really far away, maybe they'll just, I don't know, eat someone.
I mean, I always am very curious about all the people that go missing in our national parks. And yeah, I'm always curious about that. I feel like that type of, if that activity goes on, I feel like that happens more out west. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a different species of Bigfoot out there. They're bigger out there than they are on the East Coast. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah. Something to keep in mind, right? When you go camping.
right. Exactly. You have to have respect.
Yeah. What do you
So,
say to skeptics who don't believe the skunk ape exists?
well, I mean, there's a lot of things that we believe in that, we can't like put on a table in front of us. And also, there are a lot of species of animals that get discovered every day that we didn't know about before, like in the Amazon. I mean, they're discovering things all the time. So, what's to say that there's not a Sasquatch out there? That's not a another branch off of the evolutionary tree. Okay. Um, I mean, you can't. I mean, just because you don't have a body, I mean, there's so much evidence now, vocalizations and footprints and video and all types of things. I mean, it's almost a sealed deal at this point to me anyway. But yeah, I mean, I mean, who's to say they're not out there? I mean, like I said, they're discovering new things all the time. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. These things have already been discovered. It's just not being announced to the public because people run into them all the time. And there's constantly sighting reports showing up on the internet and on websites. And, you know, a lot of people, they even go on video and talk about it, whether it's like law enforcement agents, retired military, and just all walks of life. So it's out there. I mean, the cat's out of the bag, just the authority figures aren't ready to admit it. And you know, there's people in the government that know about it. Obviously, not everyone, but I feel like it's a known thing when it comes to like forest rangers. And I don't think every forest ranger knows.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, people that have been working there for a long time, they've heard a thing or two.
Well, that's the thing is that, it's like, think about it. If you think about it this way, it's like there are, there's out, especially out west, okay, these national parks, they have primitive camping areas, that people can go and camp. And, when they close one of those, especially after it's been open for years and years and years, and they close one of those, doesn't it pique your interest a little bit why they closed that area? Was it because people had run-ins? I mean, it's already primitive camping, so there's not really like crazy facilities, but you know what I mean?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
kind of like,
I know
I feel like
exactly what you
primitive
mean.
camping is, yeah. And, and the other thing that I'm curious about, these people that work for our government that operate drones and, look at the spy satellites and all that stuff, because they do it, they have to see these things. If you're looking over top of Washington State, you have to, people have to be seeing these things. But obviously, top secret, they can't talk about it.
Yeah, they would have to admit that they're spying on the people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a law enforcement agent here in Missouri that told me about his Bigfoot encounter. He was a canine unit and he was at a place called Little Indian Creek. It's a pretty fair sized conservation area out in the middle of nowhere, but he was driving out there around midnight or like 2 or 3 in the morning, and this huge white Sasquatch walked in front of his vehicle, and it went into a field and into the forest. I mean, the field is huge there. I've been to that area before, and he hit it with the spotlight. And he said when he hit it with the spotlight, this thing took off. And he said it had to have been running like 70 miles an hour. And he told me that there's a facility pretty close to there, and pretty much they watch. I don't know. It's like like a geothermal satellite company, and he said what he was told was that these things have seen, like, those people have seen Sasquatch on the thermal satellites in space, and they watch them and they know all about them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yeah, because if they can look into your windows from space, you know that they can catch Sasquatch out in the woods. And I feel like those satellites have like some type of LiDAR where you can just see through the trees, because there was also this, I don't know, like these people were being held captive in New York and these big buildings. And the show was talking about how the law enforcement had like the capability to see through the walls and they could tell where every hostage was. And this was like on a public TV show. So I'm like, dang, if they can look through buildings, they can definitely look through the trees.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I totally believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's that recent video that came out from North Carolina of the Black Hawk helicopter, some type of military helicopter, and they were hovering over an area waiting to do their training or whatever, and one of the guys captured this huge bipedal creature, and it's running through the mountains. I mean, it's crossing like the creeks with ease at nighttime. I thought that was pretty interesting. So they definitely know about it. It's just, I don't know, they don't want to tell us.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, they already admitted UFOs were real. I feel like it's just one next step.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we should be told, because yeah, people are out there looking for them, but most of the time, like, these things like come up to people's camp or they'll just walk in front of someone's vehicle. So I feel like if they didn't do that, I would understand their reasoning, just leave them alone. But these things are approaching people. So we need to be aware of it, because you just never know if you're going to run into one. And it's sad because, like we talked about earlier, people are going missing. Like, people just turn around and their daughter's missing. Like, she was right behind them on the trail and they can't find them. They immediately send out a search team right after it happens, and the person is never found. Like, that happens a lot. And if these things are doing it, we definitely need to know about it, because the missing people reports just keep on rising. And obviously, a lot of it could have to do with like alcohol, drugs, mental health, people getting lost. But in some cases, I definitely do believe it's cryptid creatures. And that's just scary to think that some unknown creature can come out and just take you away and you'll never be seen again.
Yeah. Or they'll find you like way far away from, or on up they'll find your remains up on a peak someplace and they don't know how you got up there. That's happened a few times too.
Yeah, for
I've read
sure.
about that
Yeah,
where
me
they
too.
found people's, yeah. So,
Yeah, they
but
find their belongings, their clothes, and then like miles away up on a mountain, they find the remains, and it just doesn't make sense. A lot of times, like they've already searched an area, and when they come back, the clothes is folded nice and neatly, like where they parked at. And I feel like that's like a Bigfoot sign because I've had gifts from the Sasquatch when they were around here. And it's like the area that I would start at, like where I'd leave all my stuff at like my base camp, basically. Like I'd come back and there would be objects sitting there, like a stick poked in the ground or a mushroom or a feather. And it's like they were letting me know that they were watching me. So I feel like it's the same scenario with the clothes, like they just bring it back.
oh, that's interesting. Oh, wow.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is really interesting.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to start researching the skunk ape? Like, where should they start in Florida?
So, oh, well, just see where you live, where's close to you. What I did is I just started looking. I started at the BFRO website, and I started looking for incidents that happen around me, close to me. And then I just started hiking those areas. And when you're out hiking and you're out and about and stuff, sometimes you meet people and talk to them. Sometimes you have the same interests and stuff. And sometimes you can hear about sightings like that, from people on the trail or something like that. But that's a really good way to start. Just see, like, I didn't even know that there was a report filed at a little pond, like right behind where I used to live in Florida, where we lived for 20 years. I had no idea. So, yeah, so that's what I would start doing. Just seeing where the activity is, and I looked on there and saw where it was in relation to like parks, wildlife management areas that you could visit, stuff like that, and then I just started going into those areas and hiking, and just talking to people that, you meet. And that's where I would start. That's a good start. And then later on, you can. A lot of people have a lot of equipment. When they go out into the like drones and night vision cameras and everything like that. I don't have anything like that, um, but the sky's the limit. I mean, you can go anywhere and explore in Florida. But that's where I would start, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great advice. I believe these things are a lot closer than what people believe, especially if you already live like in a forested area. Chances are there are sighting reports close to you, no matter where you are in North America.
Right. I mean, we do that here. I mean, I've like mapped out around us where I know things have happened or things I've taken off their website or other websites, and then my husband and I will go there, and 9 times out of 10, there's either a creek we can walk or a trail that we can walk, and we'll just go there and walk that trail, and we'll just say, well, what makes this an agreeable place for a Sasquatch to be? Is there ample game? Are there houses close where they leave out their garbage? Is there opportunistic food opportunities? Is there water? That type of thing. Is there like any of that? So, and that's what we do here. We do quite a lot of hiking doing that here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to discover sign and possibly run into one. One thing I've noticed with my research is, like, for example, with the mountain gorillas, like they take them miles and miles up into the mountains and they have machetes and they're cutting these trails to get through and eventually they find the gorillas. But with Sasquatch, I've noticed like sometimes if you just set up camp in a remote area, these things will come up to you. And I don't know. I feel like they become really curious, and when you're not encroaching on their land, they'll come up to you and they'll like break a branch or do a loud wood knock. But I don't know. Do you feel like it's better sitting in place in a wilderness area or exploring miles and miles?
Well, what I would do, I mean, honestly, is that I would, if you're in a place like, let's say, like the Airbnb we were just at, um, I would like cook dinner on a grill, and you have that food smell, so cook something really good, like barbecue chicken or something, and then go down to your fire pit and just sit around the fire pit at night. You know what I mean? And I feel like they're very, very intelligent. So they're very, very curious. And if you're like around there, they're going to smell what you're cooking. That's going to bring them in. All right. And then they're going to see you around the fire pit, because you're talking, people make noises, laughter, all that stuff. And I feel like that brings them in because they're just naturally curious. So, and like you said, then you might hear a wood knock, then you might hear a branch break, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they might vocalize or. But
Mhm.
and I'm not going to say that that happens like every time, but I think that's a good start, especially if you live in a place or you have access to a place that's, next to like we are vast tracts of national forest, and yeah, that's why I'm looking forward to camping. They're just curious. They'll come in and just see what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like both approach, like both tactics are good methods because, like, when you're hiking, you might run into like a structure area, or if you're camping,
Hmm.
these things may be really smart, and when you're walking around, they're able to avoid you. So, like, the curiosity will get the best of them, and if you're cooking food, they'll come in.
Yes, yes. And I also think the hiking in the woods is excellent too. It's just I don't know my bearings up here enough yet to go that route, but I don't know. I think they're here, and I think that more people should be studying them and realizing these things are real. I mean, they're a part of our world, and I'm as curious about them as they are about us. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Airbnb that you stayed at, that looked awesome. I mean, that was just amazing. I love Airbnbs, especially as a Bigfoot researcher, because let's say if you do set up camp out in the middle of nowhere and you have like a really expensive drone, a bunch of camera equipment, it's hard to go exploring and just leave all that behind. It's like, what if someone comes and just steals all this stuff? So with like an Airbnb, like you can lock it up and then go explore, but you're also out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of these Airbnbs are way out in the country and forested areas by national forest or conservation wilderness areas. So I feel like that's a really good method for Bigfoot researchers.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you can go on a website and see where sightings have been, okay? And then you can go on Airbnb and see if anybody's got a place around there, and then just go rent it and then just go up there and check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And did you guys hear anything strange when you stayed at the Airbnb?
We My husband said so it had a creek that ran like semi-small river that ran up behind it. And we walked the creek a few couple of days while we were there. And the first day we were there, my husband said, because the creek kind of goes up around this bend, and he said that he thought he heard someone walking in the creek. And we never saw another person the whole time we were there. And I mean, I guess it could have been like a deer or a bear or something like that. But he said, but I mean, my husband was in the military. It's like he knows when something is bipedal. But he said, I don't know what that was, but I heard something walking in the creek. And then he heard like a couple of small noises in the woods. But there's so much wildlife up there, unless you actually see something. And we weren't up there long enough to really get in depth, but I would like to go back there because it's a beautiful area that is Augusta County is has a lot of Bigfoot documentation up there. because it's part of the national forests up there. So, but I would like to go back.
Yeah, it sounds like an excellent area. And yeah, Melissa, you did an awesome job at describing these experiences and relaying the encounters that other people around you had. And yeah, that's just amazing. I would love to go to Florida and experience the activity myself. I am talking with other researchers and trying to pick people's brain to see if it's possible or if maybe the researchers around here would like to go on a trip.
Well, don't go in the summertime.
Yeah.
That's all I can
When's
say.
the best time to go?
I would go, I would go when it's still cool out, which is hardly ever, but I would go like at the end of January, beginning of February. Um, the thing about if you go to Volusia County, the thing about that is that the months of February and March, you have a lot of large special events, so there's a ton of people around. But if you go like at the mid to end of January, it's maybe, I don't even know. I mean, it's like what, 50 degrees there, if that. Uh,
Yeah,
and
that would be ideal.
there's no bugs, and yeah, no bugs, and and it's fairly dry, and you don't have to worry about the sweltering heat of summer, because I mean the heat in Florida anymore is just downright dangerous. It's so hot.
Oh yeah, I bet.
So
Here in Missouri, it's pretty nasty right now. Like when I'm walking through the woods, I'm constantly pulling spider webs off my face, off my
oh,
eyelashes, and then I'm
oh
bending down to check for ticks on my legs, and it's just like, ugh. And then as I'm doing that, mosquitoes are biting through my shirt, on my back, and on the back of my neck. It's like all at the same time. It's just like, ugh, it's a nasty feeling, especially with how hot and humid it is. But if I don't get out, then I'll have to wait till winter time. And I'm just utilizing each season for the benefits that it provides. And the summertime may be nasty, but everything's real thick. People aren't getting out in the woods. And I feel like it's a good time to experience Bigfoot activity. And yeah, each season has a perk.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, when it gets real deep summer, and the thing about it is August anymore down there, August isn't even the hottest month. I mean, it's kind of like moved up. Everything's moved up a month. It's like September seems to be the hottest month now, and you have to keep in mind also too hurricane season. Uh, because if you go into a place that's had a hurricane come in, a lot of its cover is gone. So you have to think about that too, so but
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there's plenty of there are plenty of places uh around that I know of that you could go and investigate. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you for sharing the information openly, especially about some of the locations. And I'm sure it will help out locals in the area who are out there trying to look for Bigfoot.
well, I'm happy to do, and I'm happy to share my story. So when I watched that episode that you had up about the other gentleman that had the experiences in East Central Florida, or Northeast Central Florida, yeah, I pretty much knew right where that was.
Yeah, and it's
So
awesome to hear you validate that these creatures are there indeed and they're still there today. Do you feel like the hurricanes disrupt the Sasquatch behavior? Like, where would they go? What would they do when a huge hurricane hits?
I feel like they, like any other animals, I feel like they kind of know where the high ground is. So when you get these hurricanes that come in along the coast, they're all just going to head in west. And most of the animals know enough to get out of the way, and they know where the high ground is. And I mean, Sasquatch, I mean, I can't imagine that they would be any different. But sometimes, these things just blow up on you, and I feel like some of them get drowned too. It's just like people, because they have little ones too. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And if the wildlife survives, then surely these things can.
right, it's because it's like, uh, I don't know, animals just know things. They know things from the environment, if the barometer's dropping or, like you would have in a hurricane. It's like animals can feel that with their body, and then they're going to start moving away from the water. And yeah, they probably just move on up to the middle of the state. The middle of the state's higher, obviously, than the coast. So they probably just move up into that green heart we talked about in Florida. Just hang out there until it passes.
Yeah, I would agree. I noticed here in Missouri before a huge storm hits, like all the wildlife just disappears. And I'll go walking through the forest. It's like, where are they? And after it gets done raining, maybe it's still sprinkling after the storm, all of a sudden all the animals start coming out. And it's like, man, they were hiding somewhere. It's like they knew that a bad storm was coming in.
Yeah, we don't really have, I mean, in North Florida we do, but we don't really have like caves and stuff that people can crawl into. But we do have a lot of, I don't know. I mean, it depends on where you go. There's a lot of like abandoned areas too. So I don't know. I don't know where they go, but they seem to avoid, for the most part, animals seem to avoid, the storms. So.
Yeah. Do you like where you're living at now compared to where you were at in Florida? You probably get more
Yes.
peace.
Well, and most days it's cooler, not lately, but most days it's cooler, and it's a completely different ecosystem here. I mean, the forest, it's different animals, different sounds, different terrain. So it's something new. I've never lived in the mountains, and I really enjoy it. So, and looking for Sasquatch, it just goes hand in hand with that. I feel like the more time that you spend in nature, the more tuned in you get with it, so that you could pick out things that maybe aren't, I don't want to say normal, but that are less, well, like things that are out of the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you move from one Bigfoot hotspot area to another. So you're definitely probably going to experience more in the future, especially since you're going into the woods. You talked about going camping. I think you will run into these things again.
Yeah. Yeah. So we love to go hiking. So yeah, we will. I'm sure we will.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be careful when you're out there. You never know what these things are capable of, and definitely keep your head on a swivel.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any questions for me before we end the call?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, Melissa, you did an excellent job, and I really appreciate your kindness. Your experiences were truly fascinating, and I appreciate everything you did today.
Well, thank you, Miguel. I appreciate you very much. And I'll be looking for the thing like a couple months down the line, or however long it takes you to do that. I appreciate you calling me and spending time with me like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm extremely grateful that you logged down your report, and it really helps out the channel. So, yeah, I should be thanking you.
Thanks. So I'll be in touch if we have anything else go on up here, because we're actively looking.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know if you run into another one, okay?
I will.
All right, Melissa, you have yourself an excellent day, and I really appreciate you, okay?
All right. Thanks, Miguel. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. You take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, Melissa, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the state of Florida. Lake Harney definitely looks like a really cool area. I mean, the whole state looks awesome, and I would love to check it out someday, even if it's going on vacation at the beach or staying in the swamps. I think that would be so cool. And I just think it would be an awesome place to do research, because in some swamp areas it looks like huge grasslands, and I think that would be really cool to fly the drone over those types of areas. But of course, in the big woods, it's really hard to see. There's a lot of pines, a lot of palmettos, and it's super thick, but still, I would feel like I'm in Jurassic Park walking through there. And I am sure the bugs are horrible, the snakes, the gators, the humidity, the heat, And yeah, it's a lot to deal with being in the woods in general during the summertime. And right now it's super tough around here because of all the ticks, spiders, snakes, mosquitoes, and poison ivy. It's just horrible. But anyways, I appreciate everyone for listening. If you have a Bigfoot or cryptid encounter you would like to share with me, please get in touch with me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. And I really appreciate all the support from everyone, the donations, and you guys are amazing. Until the next one, you guys be safe out in the woods.